Hey Unexplained Ones, this is Dr. Mounts, and thanks for tuning in to All Things Unexplained, where we talk about everything from Bigfoot to UFOs to astrophysics and everything in between. So if that sort of thing's for you, make sure to follow us wherever you podcast, along with a review and a rating. It takes a lot to get All Things Unexplained on the air, and this podcast is made possible by listeners like you. You can support the show by checking us out on Linktree at ATU Podcast. That's ATU Podcast. There you'll find links to all our socials. You can support us on Venmo. You can purchase your official All Things Unexplained merchandise, and you can even book us on Cameo. And now, let's get to the show.
Previously on All Things Unexplained.
When I regained consciousness, I was in such pain that it would actually sort of knock me back out again, the pain. I knew something was terribly wrong with my body. I could move, but it was so difficult. But I felt I was probably safe in a hospital, that I was being taken care of. There was some sort of device across my chest. I had a lot of pain in my chest. I could hear the sounds of movement around me, and I just took this to be doctors. Then when I looked in the direction of the movement sounds, I could see blurry forms that I thought were doctors wearing surgical caps and masks. So when I sharpened the focus in my eyes, I could see that was not the case. I was looking into the face of this creature. Then I knew I was in very great danger. And here this face was so close to me, another right behind him. The fear gave me the strength to raise my arm. It pushed the one that was standing close to me back, and he fell into the other one. And I was rolling away from him, and this object across my chest fell off. I got on my feet and staggered back, and I bumped up against a shelf, and there was an array of instruments laying out there. I just glanced, grabbed the biggest thing I could find, and started flailing in their direction to keep them from coming any closer. That moment was the focus of my nightmares for months afterward. They stopped with their hands extended towards me and staring in a way that felt invasive and intrusive, like they were looking inside of me. It was horrible. I came to realize that it had to do with the stare, and the stare was them trying to reassert control, I think. Once it was apparent they weren't going to physically or even telepathically control me, they turned and left the room and went to the right. And so I went in the opposite direction that they had gone. Were they behind me? Were they pursuing me? Or was around this tight curve that I couldn't see more than a few feet ahead, was I going to run into something worse? Adding to the panic was this feeling of suffocation, this feeling I was about to pass out from lack of air. I came to a doorway and looked in. I was fearful of the chair in the middle. It was a high-back chair, and I was afraid there could be someone sitting in it. So when I moved to the side and could see that there was no one in it, then I moved towards the chair. And it was then that I realized that the closer I came to the center of the room, the walls, the floor, the ceiling were darkened except for points of light. It was a planetarium kind of a projection. My main concern was open these doors. I assumed that perhaps the buttons that were on the arm of this chair might open the door. That moved the star pattern. I was already unsteady on my feet. I turned, and there was a man in the door. He had this glass helmet over his head. I started towards him, babbling questions and trying to tell him about these creatures that were there. He took me by the arm and was leading me out. We went through what I think was an airlock. You know, this door closed and that door opened, and we went out. At this point, the craft we came out of was parked inside of this big hangar-like building, or it might have been part of a larger craft. He led me towards the vertical wall opposite this, through some doors, down a hallway, into a room where there were some other people. They were very similar to him. A similar dress, similar coloring, light-colored hair, light-colored eyes. They're leading me, taking me by the arm and putting me over towards this table. I was in a weakened condition, but I felt their strength. But still, the panic I had at being restrained like that, I was able to jerk one hand free And they put this mask over my face, and I got my finger under the edge of that trying to pull it away. But before I could pull it away, boom, I was out.
All Things Unexplained. Hosted by Dr. Mounts.
Let's face it, we were always ready to roll without him anyway.
CJ Derringer.
Ain't nobody perfect, right?
And Smitty Neebs.
I've never planned out hardly anything my whole life. I just freeball.
Featuring Cajun Man.
I'm just old nobody, somebody looking for somebody.
We have Travis Walton joining us via phone now, and suddenly I feel a lot like Art Bell.
Yeah, I it's just my own thinking, but, I had a theory that, they refer to the aliens as humanoid, and a lot of people think, oh, that means resembling humans. No. Humanoid means 2 arms, 2 legs, a head on top, 2 arms, 2 hands, and to me, that's the most likely thing that's going to result in something that can manipulate matter, make machinery, and you're not going to have a slug make a machine. You're not going to have a giant cockroach make a UFO. It's just not the way you would develop something that can manipulate matter to create craft to come here. That's just my own thinking. Just biologically, the pressure to be formed that way would probably be so wide that you could have a variety of species, all very similar in overall form, coming here and be. And matter of fact, some could even look very much alike and actually come from different planets and develop independently. And in support of that, we have things here on the Earth. We have the American flying squirrel. In Australia, you have the sugar glider. Now, they've developed completely separate. Now, the sugar glider is still a marsupial, but the strategy for moving from tree to tree and that sort of thing is the same. And there's a number of other species where you have them developing completely independently here in similar environments and ending up with very similar forms.
So do you have a feeling, Travis, for the human-like creatures that you saw at the time or now, a feeling if they were indeed human or just a humanoid alien of sorts?
Well, at the time, I took it to be human rescuers, rescuing me from these horrible monsters, But now, in retrospect, I think that they realized that I was not going to be cooperative unless I had something more familiar. Now, whether they enlisted the help of actual Earthlings or a species similar to us, or were somehow able to quickly simulate beings or the illusion of beings that would get me to cooperate and lead me to where I could be rendered unconscious again.
So possibly even some shape-shifting happening.
Possibly.
What do you think their intention was with you?
Well, at the time, I was just horrified by it and was, totally terrified. It was totally a negative experience. But in retrospect, I'm thinking probably the intention was to correct this accident that happened, that I had been injured by getting too close, and that they had the technology to repair the damage, but the damage was so extensive that they couldn't even employ mind control or hypnosis or telepathy to get cooperation. So I I was getting no messages of that sort from them. So, in order to get me unconscious to where they could do the procedures necessary to save my life, uh, they got something that looked human to me.
Wow. So it sounds like they were indeed trying to help you. Your initial thought of, hey, these are people trying to help me, is now you have other species that are trying to help you. For those of you that are tuning in, we do have Travis Walton on the phone now. We are so thankful that he's joining us via the phone. We have heard your story from Jennifer. She told it very eloquently and with lots of intensity. So we're grateful for that. We have been curious. Tim and I were talking about this just the other day. Have you had any other encounters or experiences since this one?
Well, nothing to report. I've tried to stick to events and sightings and anything of that sort that would be provable, multiple witnesses, that sort of thing. So, other than
Okay.
one encounter after departing a Burbank MUFON event on the way home. Now, whether that was alien or not, all I can say is a giant black triangle sped towards us at unbelievable speed, stopped directly over the top of us. And, in a city the size of Los Angeles, that's an amazing coincidence. At which point it stopped, turned to the right, and headed out to sea. Very incredible speed, incredibly huge black triangle. Now, if this was some United States military secret weapon of some sort, and they wanted me to report it, well, as such, knowing that I had just departed the Burbank MUFON meeting where Jan Harzan had just spoken. He had just recently becoming the head of MUFON, and Tracy Torme, who was the screenwriter on Fire in the Sky, had also spoken. And so I probably wouldn't even report it with the three of us seeing that, except that by the next morning, my oldest son had found a website where more than 15 other people had witnessed the same thing.
Oh, wow.
Separately, totally separately. It was set up kind of like Google Maps where you've got little circles and numbers, and all these different people saw the same craft at that time. And I didn't take a picture, much to my chagrin, but I look forward to possibly contacting the other dozen or so people who saw it too, and hopefully somebody got a picture of some sort.
Do you recall what year that was?
Yeah, I have the exact date. It was on or about my son's birthday, who was driving, and the date, of course, would be on the record as to who was speaking at Burbank MUFON when Jan Harzan had just recently become the head of the organization. Oh,
Was this
90,
several years ago or recently? Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was 90
90.
something.
Okay. I only asked because we've had many people come on our show and mention that when they see UFOs above, all of their technology goes out, but our technology is very different now than it was in the 90s, so that's not necessarily a pertinent
Well,
question
it
for
didn't
that
interrupt
particular.
the functioning of the vehicle. My son said, "Dad, should we pull over?" And I said, "No, keep going." And I was, embarrassed that I would have thought that I would have been more recovered in terms of being able
Oh,
to, pull over and take a picture. But I, the fear that gripped me was um, surprising to me.
powerful. I'm sure that the one time of getting out of the car and walking to see more and what happened after that has certainly stopped you. Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I learned my lesson, to be more cautious.
So, Travis, did this experience change your outlook spiritually in terms of what you believed and what you currently believe now?
Well, definitely, of course, it confirmed my belief. I think the most likely explanation is that these were extraterrestrials. Some people say, well, what if it was something simulated that the military was doing? Well, that's not impossible, but I think it's a lot less likely, especially since people don't understand. To me, I would challenge the people who say that, there's nothing else in the universe. Give me a break.
Mhm.
And, now that astronomers give us a lot more information about what's out there, the idea that we would be alone in the universe, the only planet supporting life, that's the preposterous claim.
Yes.
There are literally trillions, not just of um, stars, but entire galaxies.
Mhm.
They pointed the camera on this recent um, improved telescope at the most empty space in the sky that they could, and um, magnified, detected literally hundreds of galaxies. Now, the galaxies is like the Milky Way, an
Right.
entire of millions of stars. So, and one other thing that NASA has recently been more affirmative of is that, see, they had this thing called it was a theory about I can't think of the name of it right now, but the Blake equation, something like that. Anyway, they had formulated a way to calculate the number of possible life-supporting planets
Yes.
in the galaxy. Well, now with greater techniques to observe planets, they say it's a virtual certainty that every star has about a dozen planets.
Mhm.
So the numbers you
It
would
was the
plug
Drake
into
Drake equation.
the Drake equation, yes, the numbers you would plug into the Drake equation would be enormously greater than what was previously thought, because they were trying to be conservative and say, well, maybe one star in 10 has a habitable Goldilocks zone. Obviously some of the planets are going to be close to the star and way too hot, and some will be too far out, not getting enough energy to support life. But um, now that middle zone is so certain to come about that they figure that there are literally billions of planets
Right.
that support life. Now, I make the point that just because they support life doesn't mean they're all going to be coming here. I mean, what, we had 50 million years that this planet was dominated by dinosaurs. And it was just kind of unfortunate for them that they got killed off and allowed for humans to come along. But, we've only been here, a few tens of thousands of years. Nothing compared to the 50 million years of dinosaurs running around on this planet. So these life-supporting planets out there might not all be supporting, bipedal humanoids, but
Right.
still the numbers are astronomical, to coin a phrase.
They certainly
Yeah,
are, yes.
yeah,
And I believe that's the James Webb Telescope you were talking about that got those recent shots, those recent
right,
images. Yeah.
yeah,
That'll make you feel small, right? Billions of stars
yes,
like our
billions.
sun, billions of
I
solar
make the
systems
point
like
that
our solar system.
some of these aliens out there are not advanced. Some of them are like cave aliens. the
Right.
the time frame of their development varies tremendously. Some of them, though, could be many millions of years older than us. And look how far we've come in a few thousand years. A few thousand years ago, the greatest technology we had was fire, and not much more than chipping rocks and building fires. So,
Right.
how far we've come just in the last 100 or 200 years in terms of technology. You imagine that multiplied by millions of life-supporting beings out there that have had millions of years to refine technology. I think the so-called scientific skepticism that, well, maybe they exist, but they could never get here. It's pretty arrogant and presumptuous to put themselves in the position of second guessing what technology might produce in a few million years.
Absolutely. As Avi Loeb said on our show recently, well, there is an intelligent life form that has sent probes into outer space, and it's us. So there's proof that there could be others
Yeah,
too.
it can
And
happen.
yeah. So again, we're talking with Travis Walton and Jennifer Stein. Jennifer was the producer of their documentary, which is called Travis, the true story of Travis Walton. And she was kind enough to reshare parts of that story with us while Travis was having some difficulties entering. So for those of you that are wanting to know more about exactly what happened, that documentary is a really great place for you to go and check it out. And we will use our time with Travis to dive into some current event questions and other things that are going on. I wanted to ask one quick thing before I send it over to Tim and Smitty for your guys' questions. We had the joy of listening to your interview with Art Bell back in the 90s, and what a phenomenal interview that was with both you and Mike Rogers. And one thing that Mike said, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think this interview was in the early 90s. But one thing Mike said at that time was, somebody knows something. Somebody has information about what is going on and what we're seeing, and they are slowly releasing that to the public until they believe the public is ready to know more. Now we're
Well,
talking
I
20
do
years
agree
ago.
that our government and military know a lot more than we do. They may not know everything, but those who are demanding complete disclosure, to flip open the books and tell the world everything we have, are not understanding that this would put us in a very compromised position concerning our global enemies, because they're not going to flip open their books. And as long as our military can keep them guessing about what level of technology we might have acquired, we're a lot safer than if we tell them just what the limits are, because these other countries probably have their own levels of knowledge about the phenomenon that they would compare to us, and might inhibit their desire to attack.
Yes, absolutely. So do you think that we are, as a public, getting closer to being ready to know more, with our government now having, Arrow and coming out with
Well, yeah,
declassified,
you and I
things?
and your listeners are all ready. But generally speaking, I'm pretty skeptical about much of the rest of the world. The aliens
Right.
are looking at humans and observing a bunch of savages.
Mm.
Savages. I mean, there are over 100 wars going on amongst humans at any one time. If you look at entertainment, it's all about who killed who, who's going to kill who. There's so many of them that just result on homicide and depend on that for the interest. It's just discouraging to think that we have that much of an obsession with things of that nature. Yeah, I think the aliens are waiting for us to be ready, but we've got a ways to go. I mean, uh, our better scientists, our more open-minded and thinking people like you and your audience are completely ready. to communicate with these other civilizations. But so many people on the planet, the first thing they'd want to do is, we want free energy and we want the secret to all your weapons. Tell us how to make powerful weapons.
You're so right. Weapons would be the first.
And of course, if they
Tim,
gave us
did you?
free energy, that would be a global economic collapse. Petrodollars run the world, and I don't know how they could possibly grant that kind of quote unquote help without doing a tremendous amount of damage.
It's true. Yes.
It's like, you go into the jungle and there's a bunch of apes having little territorial skirmishes with each other. We say, let's help them. Let's give them some technology, and I would expect nothing but damage from such a thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's give these wild apes some weapons.
I don't think
right?
Jane Goodall would
Yeah.
approve of that strategy.
Oh, well, let's see. Let's jump into do you want to get some hot takes from him, Tim, or some listener questions?
Yeah, we do have a listener question here for you, Travis, from listener Sid Phi. So going back to when you exited the ship onto a larger structure, which, we've talked about that in a lot of different possibilities, but our listener wants to know, is it possible that you could have stepped out onto another planet, and how profound that might be? And what are your thoughts on how does it make you
Well, that's
feel that
definitely
maybe you're the
possible.
first
I have
human on another planet?
Yeah, that's possible. Or it could have been some sort of giant spaceship out there somewhere. Could be a hidden base here on Earth. I don't know. I couldn't see outside.
Mm.
The light coming through these panels looked like sunlight, but I really don't know whether it was sunlight or an artificial source that seemed like natural light.
Right. And speaking of mothership, Travis, and we're going to get into some current events with you too, if that's okay. Have you had the chance? We talked about in the 70s, it was kind of a big pill for people to swallow to consider that you might have been on board an alien mothership. But here we are in 2023, and we have Avi Loeb, the Harvard astrophysicist, co-writing a paper with the Pentagon's UFO director, UFO investigating director, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, they just come out and say in their paper that alien motherships could be seeding the Earth with alien probes. Have you had a chance to read this paper, or have you seen about that in the news?
No, I haven't read that paper. It sounds kind of speculative. We need hard data before we. But it's the theory that they would want to take this ecosystem and employ it for themselves or something. An alien takeover. I'm skeptical of that. They've been around here for decades, maybe hundreds of years. And if they wanted to remove the humans and use this planet for themselves, it would have happened a long time ago. We'd have never known what hit us. And it's not a matter of American fighter jets having dogfights in the sky with flying saucers. It's absurd. There's no contest. The kind of level of intelligence they have, like I say, no contest. So obviously, the fact that they haven't done it suggests to me that they don't intend to. I think Gene Roddenberry with Star Trek, his creation of the concept of the non-interference directive. So the series was space exploration, but in each case, making sure that the people on the planet were not aware of this craft near their planet, and it makes perfect sense. I mean, when they go to study the great apes in the jungle, they try not to influence their behavior. They try to observe from afar and not shape the behavior, just observe it.
Oh, yeah, that does make a lot of sense. We have a listener, Nora Lade Swinburne, who says she's also a UFO abductee, and she says she has an implant in her left femur. Have you ever thought that you might have any sort of implants or surgical alterations that were done?
Well, I was concerned about that, and I had upper body X-rays in the aftermath of this. Didn't detect anything, much to my relief. But
I
there were
guess
some
so.
other medical tests that were interesting. Anomalies in the brain scan that subsequent scans did not detect later. So there may have been a result of the aftermath of the injury that I experienced there.
Yeah, certainly. Or even the initial shock from the light or the beam that came. I would assume that would have some sort of repercussion on your health.
Oh yeah, probably at the time it was probably fatal.
Yeah,
So I was
right.
very concerned about negative health effects, but I had none. I worked long hours just to sort of escape thinking about it. I'd worked 12-hour days
Mm.
for decades, and I mean, I wouldn't even take vacations. I would just work through vacations, and I never called in sick one time in all those years. So that was reassuring.
So I had asked Jennifer this earlier. In that interview that you did with Art Bell, you were promoting the movie Fire in the Sky, half promoting, half telling your own truths of that story. And you mentioned that this was it for you, that you were done talking about it, that you didn't want to talk about it anymore.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
have you ever gotten to have that break? Are you feeling like it's resurfacing again?
Well, for a while, I tried to hide from it, and refused interviews and just didn't want to talk about it. Like I said, working 12 hours a day, but that wasn't working. You can run, but you can't hide. You know what I mean? Uh,
Hmm.
I, I wish it never happened, but nobody's going to forget it. So I may as well try to make something good come of it, and if at
Yes.
least educating people to have a more reasonable um, perspective on this phenomenon.
Oh, yeah. And Travis, this is Dr. Mounts, by the way, with All Things Unexplained. Speaking of Travis Walton on the phone, I was telling Jennifer earlier that we are so appreciative for you being out there and continuing to tell your story and go on podcasts like this, because there's a whole generation of folks out there like myself, like CJ, like Smitty, Fire in the Sky, whilst a departure from the actual events that you experienced. It came out in 1993, and I was a senior in high school. I think Joe Rogan might have been a senior in high school. You know, there's a whole
Yeah.
generation of folks here who put you on their Mount Rushmore of ufology, and we really look up to you, and we really appreciate having the chance to hear straight from you about what really happened.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to express my thoughts. There's been times I've been tempted to just walk away from it and not talk about it anymore. Even change my name or something. But the prospect of perhaps having a remake of Fire in the Sky and setting the story straight, and including some perspectives that I didn't have back at that time. So I'm working on that.
What is the one thing that the movie got most wrong out of all the story?
Well, I think the movie makers knew that I wasn't going to like the abduction sequence because it was just so different from what really happened. When I received a copy of the script, those pages were
Oh,
not in it. and
Yeah.
for obvious reasons now. But um, there it was one scene where the actor, when I was on the table, has a membrane over his face, and he's struggling to scream through it, struggling to yell, and I thought that was, although it wasn't what happened, that it was probably better at communicating to people the level of panic that not being able to breathe fully um, added to my uh, level of fear. It was just nothing can make you more fearful than the feeling of suffocation. But how do you show that
True.
on camera? You know, somebody breathing hard and looking scared. So the idea of a membrane to show people how would you feel if you couldn't yell or speak or breathe with this thing over your face. So that was probably a story device that um,
Yeah.
improved on things without being accurate at all.
Yeah, you mentioned Star Trek, Travis, and interestingly, here we are, 2023, and our pop culture and our news cycles are inundated with interest in UFOs and aliens. And, we're just real curious, and our listeners are curious. What is your take on our current inundation by UFOs from Jeremy Corbell, who's been instrumental in releasing all sorts of classified, potentially UFO videos and photos, to Skinwalker Ranch. Now there's a show where they're investigating on the History Channel, to Pentagon departments named Arrow investigating UFOs, to NASA, to military encounters. We can see them on 60 Minutes talking about them, to spy balloons getting shot down in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, to over Super Bowl weekend. We had 3 UFOs that got shot down by the U.S. military that they still won't reveal any information about. What's your take
Well,
on this, Travis?
um, I think definitely that government knows more than they're letting on. Um, but I think as far as the position of these beings, it's apparent to me that they could continue with everything they're doing here and remain completely undetected. I think their technology would allow them to be here and we never know it. The frequency of so many sightings that are just at the edge of our ability to confirm in a way that would cause worldwide panic is intentional. That they're letting us glimpse just to get us to look up and think about the other possibilities, and that's the most they can give us to urge us in the direction of getting outside of ourselves and thinking about where we might be in a million years. Um, it's just too big of a coincidence for them to just be always just a sighting, nothing you can confirm, a picture that's not quite good enough to spark this worldwide panic um, or disrupt things. The non-interference directive is just give them a hint and wait for them to grow up.
You're so right. And we have noticed, and I'm curious as to your take on this, everything that we have revealed to us about UAPs. So I'm going to switch to UAPs now to reflect what they're currently telling us. It's all kind of a very, I don't know, kid gloves type of way. They never get into anything, for example, like alien abductions. We don't hear any of our Congress people talking about alien
Well,
abductions or
they
Arrow or
definitely want to
NASA.
avoid causing a panic. And, I accepted the term abduction in my own case, but in retrospect, it was more of an ambulance call than an abduction. So maybe, I've heard of other cases where people felt they were abducted and then realized later that, medical issues they had been resolved. much to their surprise.
Wow.
You know, that they didn't realize that that might have been a side effect of having been taken. But I try not to comment too much on other reports because that was my major objection to people um, coming off as experts about my case when they didn't even have the facts. So, you know, unless I've investigated a particular incident or case, um, it would be wrong for me to comment on those things, especially in the position I occupy now. That I don't want to bias anybody's thinking about things, and try to uh, plead with people on any issue, including, you know, what foods to eat or what law to vote for or whatever. Get the facts first. People, you know, come up with opinions and they don't even know what they're talking about. Come on, at least make it informed. You can have any opinion you want, but at least don't guess about what we're talking about.
That's great advice. And Travis and Jennifer, we would love to get y'all's hot takes on a few topics around ufology and perhaps the future of ufology as well as we near the end of the show. And Jennifer, you're welcome to chime in on some of these too. But Travis, I don't think you heard this, but part of our prep for the show was hearing an interview you did with Art Bell on Coast to Coast AM. I think that was via
Yeah,
phone, but
that was one of the classic interviews, and
yes,
you know, he was a very good interviewer, and he made some great comments to my skeptics that were pretty um, telling.
what did you think of Art Bell? Because a lot of us really look up to Art Bell and his role on Coast to Coast AM.
Yeah, he was a pioneer, a great man. Yeah.
That's a good hot take.
And what do you think about, you know, soon after Art Bell, George Knapp came into his role with Coast to Coast AM and it was integral in bringing out Bob Lazar's story. What do you make of Bob Lazar and what he has told about, I believe it's S2 or very close proximity to Area 51?
Well, I don't know, and I refuse to comment on cases I haven't investigated, but I do know a few things about the Bob Lazar situation that you know, I'll just leave it to people to conclude what they want about it. But I knew some people that knew him, and they used to go out, burn a tree out in the desert, and drink beer and visit and talk, you know, party out there. And they knew that he worked at Area 51, and it was no big deal. He hadn't revealed any of this information yet. So to them, it was not news. So as much as I admire Stanton Friedman, him saying that he was skeptical of him because he wasn't in the phone book, and I'm going, wait a minute, come on. If he's working on secret stuff, then that might be a good reason not to put him in the phone book.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, one other thing. He did he marketed a thing through the Tester Model Corporation, which, you know, normally made model airplanes and sports cars and stuff for kids to put together. It was a kit for a UFO, flying saucer. And that one thing that was a product that they came up with resembles the craft that we saw in the woods there more than anything else that I've seen. So other than that, I don't know too much about Bob Lazar. I mean, was at one or two events where he was, and we didn't have a chance to speak. So I don't know anything about it.
That's too bad that you didn't get to speak to Bob. That would have been a great conversation to be a fly on the wall for.
Right, meeting of the minds.
So Travis and Jennifer, not too far from where your incident, Travis, took place in Arizona, sits, I guess you would have to call it the ultimate in all of ufology, and that is Roswell, New Mexico, where something happened in 1947, and perhaps it has sparked all of this. Who knows? But I would love to know what
Yeah, I've
y'all's take on that
spoken
is.
there at Roswell on the anniversary, the last 6 or 7 years, and I'll be speaking there again this coming July.
And what do you think happened in 1947, Travis?
Well, I'd say that it was a weather balloon or something like that. It's a pretty lame cover up because nobody's going to mistake. It's like in my case where they try to say, "Oh, what they really saw was a fire watch tower." Absolutely no similarity, not even close in distance or appearance or anything. It's just something to say. And for people who don't want to believe things, all they need is something of that nature. Just give me a reason to not believe, and there they go.
Mm-hmm.
It's like so many things in today's world. People begin with a conclusion and then look for facts to support it. No, what you do is you gather the facts and then weigh the evidence and then make a decision and form an opinion.
That's right. And we have a listener question from listener Amber Dahl for you. I think it's a great question for you, Travis. What do you think about the possibility? And of course, this is supported from recent papers from the Pentagon and again, asked various astrophysicists. What's the possibility that some of these extraterrestrials could be using our oceans?
Oh, I
Or
think
in
that's
the ocean.
definitely likely. Probably, if they can travel in space and be completely independent of the external environment, it'd be a perfect cover to be underwater. Yeah.
So, for those of you that are tuning in, we are talking with Travis Walton and Jennifer Stein. We did get Travis Walton on the phone. If you're watching live, please stop texting Dr. Mounts so that we don't have to hear his phone chirp. He can't turn
Sorry.
that off because we have Travis Walton through his phone. So,
It's not helping that the
um,
NFL draft is tonight, and I don't know why my iPhone
you can't
wants to tell
silence
me.
that?
No, I don't know why my iPhone wants to. Maybe I can. I don't know why it wants to tell me every single person that gets drafted in the NFL draft tonight, but it's trying to. It's it's
Talk about how far technology has
so
come, huh?
so. This is definitely a question for uh, both of you, Travis and Jennifer, because Jennifer, I know you've done some research into this area. That What's your hot take on this notion of crop circles?
That's a long chat for me to answer.
That's well, we definitely know that some of them are people, faking them. People have said, "I faked that," but again, like I was saying, some people, they so want to disbelieve that they'll even fake the reason to disbelieve. Who knows? It doesn't make sense to me what a crop circle would be for, but I don't know. Like I said, I haven't investigated these cases, so I don't know. I do know that the presence of the craft in our case had an effect on the growth of the trees
Oh,
nearby.
that's right.
So there could be a relative effect that way.
Oh, yes, you spoke to Art Bell about that. I think Mike talked extensively about that with Art Bell and the tree rings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we also covered that in a section in the Travis Walton documentary. So people can see that. There's also short little clips of that at the website, traviswaltonthemovie.com.
Yeah, which is actually some newer information because when the effect was first discovered, we just thought it was just one tree, the one nearest where there. But to discover that a ring of these trees exhibited this effect on the side facing the craft, that was the clincher on that whole bit of data.
Yeah, and speaking of trees and sort of this other older, sometimes ancient evidence of extraterrestrial visitation, there's a show now on Netflix called Ancient Apocalypse. It's been described by some academics as the most dangerous show on Netflix, but they go extensively into the evidence of ancient civilizations that came before us and their encounters with other beings. And what did both of you make of Ancient Aliens?
Well, I was on the show Ancient Aliens a time or two, and that was very fascinating experience. But, like I say, they've been coming here a very long time, and perhaps you go back far enough and people didn't have the framework to even know what they were looking at, so they would call it something else, angels or demons or something of that sort. But um, they've been coming here for a very long time.
I was just going to say I have spent a lot of time and read most all the work of Zachariah Sitchin and did some film work for Zachariah when he was still alive. And I think there's a lot of Sumerian evidence that there were city states, kingships set up by beings that may well have come here from another place. I now speak on Göbekli Tepe, and even Klaus Schmidt, who was the key archaeologist who uncovered Göbekli Tepe and tried to make sense of the drawings and the motifs that are carved on those megalithic standing stones that form stone enclosures like Stonehenge, sort of, but there are multiple ones in Göbekli. He even thought about the cattle and grain text that are in the Sumerian records. I think they're on display, possibly at the Pennsylvania Museum, University of Pennsylvania Archaeological Museum in Philadelphia, where I used to live. And those cattle and grain texts talk about two beings, Lahar and Ashnan, who came from an area a high abode, whether it's in the mountains or whether it's above the earth, we don't know, but it's called the Duku. And they came to earth, it says, bringing the knowledge of grain, the hybridization of grains. And we can trace now with genetics the original cereal grains we use today, like barley and wheat, coming right from that area in Turkey near where Göbekli Tepe is. So is what is that text, the cattle and grain text, a memorial to this bringing of this knowledge to earth? Maybe.
Well, yeah, a little bit of tampering going on there with, the non-interference directive, but still things in the Amazon, they're discovering evidence that what was for many years just considered to be dense jungle, undeveloped forever, they're finding that, in the distant past, that it had been clear cut and farmed on a large scale, supporting a great population. So that was a surprise there.
Yeah, and that it would be an ethical dilemma, if you were just a neutral outside observer, unbeknownst to those being observed, and you witnessed this population or species about to say go extinct. You know, how long would you continue to
Yeah, little
observe?
nudges, not overt interference, not taking over, but help out now and then.
Right. And I just have one more hot take for you, Travis, before we move on. During your Art Bell interview, I believe Mike alluded to some potential encounters with what might be described as men in black or some shadowy government agents, perhaps. Have you had any dealings with such as that?
Nothing I can prove, but yeah, I think they would undoubtedly have an intense interest, and probably they could probably go a long ways towards helping me prove my case, but are staying out of it.
We had an interesting listener question come in. And this is something that we talk about all the time, about how much our technology has developed since, the 1960s, what have you. It sounds like when you were on the craft that the technology you were witnessing was far more advanced than technology that we had here at the time. And one of our listeners, Amber Dahl, was wondering, are there now technologies that you are seeing existing here on Earth that are comparable to anything that you saw while on board?
Well, that would be speculation, but yeah, there could be things that have been developed. Maybe they're just watching us come up with this stuff on our own and hoping that we don't come up with something that's too self-destructive. This AI stuff is scary.
Sure
Yes.
is. Terrifying.
I'll add to that.
Yeah.
I think there was like a proximity sensor to some extent when Travis walked into what he calls the navigation room, for a lack of a better understanding, the large round room with the egg chair in it that turned into a planetarium. So as he got close to the chair, it turned into a planetarium of sorts, but it was.
Well, that's reasonable speculation. It could be a way of seeing where it was for close quarter navigation, maneuvering, I mean.
And then when you were on the outside of this room, Travis, around the edge, it seemed like a solid room, correct?
Yeah.
So there was some sort of sensor.
Perhaps some technology allowed the observer from certain position to see through the walls of the craft.
Right.
Or maybe the image was transmitted to the interior somehow.
Were there any planets visible when it turned into the planetarium?
Oh, that's a great question.
No, just points of light.
Just points of light.
Nothing I recognized as a planet. No constellations I recognized. But
Yeah.
Right. And I'm sure you only really recall maybe 2 hours total, correct, of the 5 days that you were gone?
Yeah, just that one brief period.
Yeah. So here we're all trying to get you to recall minute details of something that's probably very foggy in your existence.
Yeah, completely obscured by the dominating emotion of absolute terror.
Of course.
Pain of injury, etc.
Yes. So I will admit that, had you asked me 10 years ago if I believed in aliens, UFOs, etc., I would have said, no way. Not even a thought on my radar, right? I would find the one reason to dismiss it, and I would dismiss it. And I've met so many people now that have had these really profound experiences in these stories, and it is hard to deny that they're reality. And I've just had an awakening, I will call it. And most of the people that we've had on this show have talked about their experiences in a very beautiful way, in a way that it has enlightened them, and it has been more of a positive experience than a negative one, because we do see in sort of movies and what have you that these experiences are always meant to be terrifying. But most everyone we have talked to have had more profound experiences than that. And hearing you talk about them bringing you up to heal you and to make you better, would you say that this was, other than sort of your backlash from people, was it a positive experience for you?
Well, I try to interpret it in that way, to certainly less traumatic than I thought at first. The idea that it might have been a rescue, making up for my own foolishness to get so close, to get a place where some accidental discharge may have occurred. That's a better take than them like firing a weapon at me and maybe perceiving my approach as threatening or something. That doesn't make sense.
Were you more apprehensive about going out, actually back to work after this happened, or did you go back to work?
Yeah, I found that a definite obstacle to overcome, and I started carrying a rifle with me for all the good that would do. But I was determined to overcome that fear, and I did.
Well, I'm
In
glad.
the daytime, anyway. I didn't like being out there at night
Yeah.
if I had a truck break down or get stuck or something.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's understandable.
Travis, I just wondered one thing, and Jennifer kind of gave us some insight, but going back to the very beginning here, when you were knocked over by the craft, and Mike and the other guys, for whatever psychological reasons, flight or fight or fear, they decided to leave in that moment. How do, what's always been your take on their initial reaction to do that?
Totally understandable. Anybody who said, "Oh, well, gee, some friends they are," to take off and leave you. No, from their point of view, the only sensible thing was, if this is a weapon that could kill people, and they thought I'd just been killed. They witnessed somebody getting killed. What good would it do to jump out and run over there and get killed too? So I think that it was understandable that they would flee, but at the same time, I give them a great deal of credit that they did come back to see if they could rescue me, or that I was in a revivable condition. So they all get A's for courage. Now in the movie, it was they didn't want to come back, and Mike said, "Well, I'm going to go back anyway," and left them waiting beside the road. But no, when he offered to let them not go back, they all elected to stay in the truck, which is much more sensible. There's no reason that they would feel safer waiting beside the road for Mike to go check on my condition.
Right.
They all went back.
And I could tell you, we could hear, in my opinion, the sincerity in Mike's voice as he talked about that with Art Bell. So I think that his sincerity and his loyalty, and his friendship, it definitely came through. And just one more thing I wondered for you, Travis. You've had a lot of time to reflect on this incident. Okay, here y'all are out here logging, working on your job, and there is a UFO out there on the ground or perhaps hovering above the ground. After all this time, what do you think it was actually even doing out there to start with?
Well, that's speculation, but learning years later that that area has the highest frequency of lightning strikes of any place in the continental United States outside of the Everglades, which is over water, led me to think more about what this high frequency of lightning might have had something to do with it, you know. And when lightning hits these trees, it doesn't just automatically burn up the forest. What it does is it uses the tree as a lightning rod to ground out, and it travels through the bark, the moist layer under the bark, because the inner part of the tree is pretty much dead. It's the living part of the tree is in the surface. So the electricity travels down through the bark and instantly turns that sap to steam, which explodes and blasts a strip off the side of the tree. And you can walk down the rim road there. And if you're within sight of a tree that's been hit, you can see the next one that's been hit within sight probably. So it's a high frequency. If you don't want to go up there where the incident happened, the Heber Chamber of Commerce has one of those trees right in the front yard. It's got a strip of bark blasted off of it like that. And it's still growing. It's healthy and everything. It's just that that's what happens when lightning strikes. But the curiosity was that a side effect of lightning striking the ground is the creation of unique crystals.
Oh.
Crystals that are not formed geologically. You've got millions of degrees and millions of volts forming very unique structures. If you'll see the illustrations that they came up with on the Joe Rogan show, pictures of these crystals, which are called fulgurite. Now, there could be some valuable purpose for them to be in the area researching these or harvesting them or something. It's just speculation, but it is, a rare coincidence that over the entire United States, to have one area have the highest frequency of lightning strikes. I've even speculated that the blast of energy that hit me might have been some sort of secondary discharge, that they had picked up some kind of energy that when I got too close, it just leaped to me through ground.
That's amazing.
And probably had fatal consequences.
Yeah.
We've had guests on the show that operate a crystal
mine.
mine in Arkansas, and they have had
Incredible.
legitimate UFO experiences there, enough so to get Josh Gates with Expedition Unknown out there, and even left, physical evidence. It magnetized different things in the area, and yeah, we totally get that a lot about the potential for crystals being involved.
Wow. Well, incredible. We are just so thankful to have you guys here and share this story with us. And for those of you that are joining later or didn't get to hear the entire thing, you can certainly watch the documentary. The film's website is traviswaltonthemovie.com. There's interviews with everybody that was involved, the eyewitnesses. I think one of the things that makes this story so compelling and so believable are those eyewitnesses, the people that were there to witness what happened to you, Travis. And Jennifer, we thank you for bringing that story to life for us. And before we sign off here for good, Travis, for those that are skeptics of UFOs, skeptics of abductions, what thought would you want to leave them with?
Well, like I said, get the facts first. Now, not every report is an extraterrestrial craft. I think that people do make mistakes, misidentify things. That happens. But the skeptics, when they can seize upon an example and say, see, we proved it was something else, that doesn't disprove the entire phenomena at all. Failure to prove does not disprove. It's just a silly error of logic that people make.
Travis actually makes a great comment in the film, which I really love and is one of the real moments of humor. He says, I wouldn't wish this experience on anyone except maybe a skeptic.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful for them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It would be. We're all skeptics till it happens to us, right?
Yep.
That's for sure. Well, thank you to all of our listeners who tuned in, who shared their comments and questions with us. And thank you to Jennifer and Travis for joining us. It's been a wonderful, enlightening evening. We certainly thank you for sharing your story with us. And Smitty, why don't you go ahead and take us on out?
Well, I just want to say, when I watch Fire in the Sky, there would be no absolute knowledge that I would ever be talking to Travis Walton. This has been phenomenal.
Well, thanks for having me, and I hope I've left some food for thought.
You definitely have, and thank you, Jennifer. And be happy, be strange, and listen to All Things Unexplained.
You've been listening to All Things Unexplained. If you liked this podcast, please do give us a 5-star rating and leave us a review. If you would like to hear more All Things Unexplained, be sure to follow us wherever you listen to your podcasts. Our show depends on the support of listeners like you. Find us on Venmo under the business accounts at Bigfoot UFO. If you can't get enough of us, please check us out at allthings-unexplained.com. A special thanks to our producer, director, sound mixer, editor, and the man who wears far too many hats. No, seriously, he wears a lot of hats. Dr. Tim Mounts. Without you, we couldn't keep the lights on. Thanks for listening to All Things Unexplained.